The sky over Tehran did not just break, it shattered. In the dead of night, while most of the Western Hemisphere was sound asleep, the long-simmering shadow war between the Middle East's greatest adversaries exploded into the blinding, concussive light of joint American and Israeli airstrikes. At exactly 2:30 a.m. on Saturday, a grainy pre-dawn video dispatch dropped from the Oval Office. Looking directly into the camera, President Trump announced the unthinkable. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the 86-year-old supreme leader who ruled the Islamic Republic with an iron fist and a paranoid obsession, has been eliminated. For over 3 decades, Khamenei governed his nation with the suffocating certainty that the United States and Israel were actively plotting his violent downfall. In a staggering twist of historical irony, that exact paranoia has just proven prophetic. With a single, unilateral executive order executed without congressional approval, without a coalition of European allies, and without a shred of public intelligence justifying an imminent threat, the commander-in-chief has crossed a geopolitical point of no return. But here is the terrifying reality the mainstream headlines are barely grasping. We aren't just looking at the overdue demise of a brutal autocrat who impoverished his own citizens, slaughtered peaceful protesters, and funded a global axis of resistance. We are staring directly into a terrifying, unpredictable void. A massive power vacuum has just violently opened in one of the most heavily armed and deeply volatile regions on the planet. And in geopolitics, a vacuum is always filled with blood. The immediate fallout is already in motion. The opening salvos of retaliation have struck a U.S. Navy installation in Bahrain. Air raid sirens are wailing. Global markets are bracing for shockwaves. Are we watching the collapse of a 50-year theocratic nightmare? Or has the United States just blindly kicked the hornet's nest, plunging us into another endless, unwinnable Middle Eastern war? The echoes of the CIA's 1953 coup in Iran are deafening. We birthed this exact regime through our own intervention, and now we may be fertilizing the soil for something far worse. Before we break down the leaked intelligence assessments, the terrifying prospect of a Revolutionary Guard military takeover, and exactly what this unprecedented strike means for your security, I need you to do something. The geopolitical chessboard has just been kicked over, and we are tracking the fallout in real time. Hit that subscribe button, leave a like to support independent analysis, and sound off in the comments right now. Was this assassination a masterstroke of deterrence or the trigger for World War III? Let's get into the hard facts. For decades, Iran's supreme leader maintained an iron grip on his nation, driven by a paranoid, ruthless certainty that both his own citizens and the United States were plotting his downfall. Ultimately, that paranoia proved prophetic. Following President Trump's declaration on Saturday that joint American and Israeli airstrikes successfully eliminated the 86-year-old Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, a dark chapter closes. A half-century of stolen potential for the Iranian state is sealed. Now, as the region stares down a deeply volatile power vacuum, we must speak plainly. There should be no sympathy for a tyrant whose legacy is written in suffering and slaughter. Taking the reins in 1989, Khamenei's entire worldview was anchored in a toxic fixation on Western adversaries. As the ultimate authority, he suffocated any domestic opposition, smearing democratic aspirations as foreign subversion, while beefing up the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps' spy network to terrorize the Iranian populace. He drained his country's wealth, plunging his own people into poverty to fund overseas shadow wars and a nuclear ambition that left Tehran a global pariah. When his citizens took to the streets demanding basic rights, he responded with bullets, culminating in the massacre of thousands earlier this year. Beyond his borders, his life's work was pure chaos, engineering the so-called axis of resistance that spread a web of proxy violence through Gaza, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen. It's tempting to look at the decapitation of this regime and envision the collapse of the theocratic state. But as analysts, we have to pull back and examine the profound, long-term hazards this sets into motion for both Washington and Tehran. We cannot ignore the historical irony. The very establishment Mr. Trump is trying to dismantle was birthed from prior American meddling. The Ayatollahs rode a wave of fury into power back in 1979, a direct backlash to the 1953 CIA-backed coup that entrenched the corrupt American-supported Shah. Fast forward to today. The commander-in-chief, locking arms with Israel, Tehran's ultimate adversary, has directed the targeted killing of a sovereign nation's leader. He executed this monumental strike without laying out a coherent roadmap for the aftermath, and virtually entirely isolated from the broader international community. And that triggers massive alarm bells about tomorrow. Right now, Iran lacks any unified, credible opposition movement ready to step up, leaving a terrifying blank slate. Khamenei had engineered a succession pipeline heavily skewed toward the clerical elite. However, current U.S. intelligence assessments paint a much darker picture. This sudden void could easily be hijacked by the most extreme, hardline elements within the Revolutionary Guard. The threat matrix here, from an all-out civil war and domestic bloodbaths to a regional shockwave, is off the charts. Looking at Mr. Trump's track record on the world stage, there is scant evidence he views Iranian stability as a strategic priority. In just his second term, the president has already unleashed military force across 7 different countries. Consider the playbook from just 2 months ago. The administration ousted Venezuelan strongman Nicolas Maduro, yet bizarrely allowed his inner circle to maintain control, completely hanging a wildly popular democratic opposition out to dry. The executive action regarding Iran reeks of that same shoot-from-the-hip impulsivity. Releasing a pre-dawn video dispatch at 2:30 a.m. on Saturday, the president declared the offensive was necessary to thwart imminent threats, yet provided zero intelligence to back up that explosive claim. The Oval Office has entirely failed to articulate why this military gamble won't devolve into the same quagmires we saw with regime change efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan. Those conflicts also decapitated hostile governments, but their tragic, blood-soaked aftermaths have left the American public deeply cynical about endless wars. And as the dust settles over a fractured Iran, the United States must brace for blowback. While it is factual that Tehran has struggled to inflict severe casualties on the U.S. in recent years, and their conventional armed forces are battered, they still command a formidable stockpile of ballistic missiles designed to fracture advanced defense grids. We've already seen the opening salvos. A U.S. Navy installation in Bahrain, alongside other regional assets, was struck this weekend. Beyond ballistics, Tehran retains the capacity to unleash devastating cyber offensives and mobilize proxy militias against American troops and coalition partners. Yet the most severe threats are likely the ones looming over the horizon. Make no mistake about the gravity of this moment. The American president just orchestrated the lethal targeting of a foreign head of state, bypassing congressional authorization, sidelining crucial allies, and operating blind regarding the day after. If history is any indicator, going rogue on the global stage carries brutal, unseen consequences. When Washington operatives greenlit the coup in '53, they had no idea they were fertilizing the soil for the most violently anti-Western government in the modern Middle East. Navigating the impending storm in Tehran demands meticulous strategy, sharp vigilance, and a united global front. We strongly advise the president to coordinate with Capitol Hill, though candidly, precedent suggests he won't. Given that stark reality, the legislative branch has to step into the breach. Representatives on both sides of the aisle are entirely justified in demanding transparent intelligence briefings and triggering a hard debate on war powers. The executive must be constrained and held to account. Ultimately, Washington cannot steer through this geopolitical minefield solo. An administration that has routinely alienated its closest democratic allies must urgently pivot and bring the international community to the table. Handling the fallout of a post-Khamenei Iran is not a job for a lone wolf. It requires strategic clarity and a cohesive worldwide coalition. For generations, the citizens of Iran have paid a devastating price, hoping for a breath of democratic air. After surviving decades of tyrannical rule and crippling global exile, they have more than earned the chance to build a liberated, secure destiny. We are standing on the precipice of a fundamentally altered global order. By decapitating the Iranian regime, President Trump hasn't just killed a dictator, he has detonated a geopolitical earthquake. The elimination of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei removes a ruthless autocrat responsible for untold suffering. But it also violently strips away the central unifying pillar of the Islamic Republic's power structure. Without him, the facade crumbles, leaving raw, unmitigated power up for grabs. What happens when the smoke clears? We are looking at three distinct future scenarios, and the stakes could not be higher. Scenario 1. The U.S. intelligence community's darkest fear becomes reality. The extremist hardline factions within the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps use the chaos to stage an internal coup, sidelining the clerics entirely. Iran morphs from a theocratic state into a pure, heavily armed military dictatorship with a vengeance, backed by an unconstrained nuclear ambition. Scenario 2. Absolute fragmentation. The Central Command fractures, and Iran descends into a brutal, multi-faction civil war. The violence spills over its borders, triggering massive refugee crises and mobilizing proxy militias across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, dragging American troops back into a regional bloodbath. Scenario 3. The wild card, and the only true glimmer of hope. The Iranian people, who have bled, starved, and died for decades protesting this very regime, finally seize the apparatus of the state. They capitalize on the chaos to tear down the remnants of the autocracy and carve out the democratic, open society they have so deeply earned. But right now, Washington is flying blind. Bypassing Congress and alienating the international community to execute a lone wolf assassination is a monumental gamble. The initial ballistic strikes on the U.S. Navy base in Bahrain are merely a preview. Tehran's cyber warfare divisions and sleeper cells are waking up to a world without their supreme commander. We are repeating the dangerous hubris of 1953, planting seeds of chaos without a cohesive roadmap for tomorrow. The end game is completely unwritten, and the storm is only just making landfall. This is a rapidly developing crisis, and the decisions made in the next 72 hours will dictate the balance of global power for a generation. How do you see this playing out? Will the Iranian people finally reclaim their country? Or are we tumbling headfirst into another catastrophic, blood-soaked conflict in the Middle East? Drop your exact predictions in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If you want to stay ahead of the mainstream narrative with sharp, unfiltered geopolitical analysis, hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell so you never miss an urgent update, and share this video with someone who needs to know the truth. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next one.